Hold the minutes, how it's consent agenda. Oh, Rick called the meeting to
Hi.
order and then it said Rick was
Yeah.
absent.
Oh, okay, hang on.
Make the correction.
I'll come with it.
Yeah, Sue, the consent agenda has the minutes. The consent agenda has the minutes from last meeting, and it states that Rick presented the agenda,
Oh,
and then it also says that he was absent.
yes.
Should that be pulled out? What would the procedure be?
Just to note it publicly.
Okay. So, still introduce, but make note of
I did
the,
too.
That he was not
Okay.
at the meeting.
Good evening.
Jason wants to put announcements tomorrow. Okay, so Jason wants to say 2000. Drug addiction, and so he's come and spoken a number of times to my class to extreme nonfiction because we cover the topic of addiction sometimes. And he's also come and spoken to some honors class.
Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order.
The 10th grade.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call will show all members, we're missing Joanne. We have an agenda in front of us this evening, Mr. Mayak. Any additions or corrections?
just to clarify again, there was one addition added this morning, if you saw your email on the purchase of a mobility van. With that, the agenda would be complete.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Mueller, seconded by Mr. Schoenrock to approve the agenda as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public comments this evening, Mr. Mayak.
There are none.
That will move us right into the superintendent's report. With that, Mr. Mayak, please.
Yeah, I'm gonna make one quick statement and then pass it along. Just a reminder that the MSBA Winter Conference is 3 short months away. Sue's gonna be working on registration again, so January 12th, which is a Thursday, and then Friday, January 13th are the dates of the conference. So if you're interested, able and willing, talk with Sue and we'll get things lined up. And with that, I am going to pass it over for our first presentation. Tom Olinger from Abdu Eck and Meyer is here to present the audit findings. Just make note again that Tom will make the presentation. We'll have time for question and answer. And later on in the agenda then, after Tom departs, in the business section, we'll approve the audit as presented. So with that, Tom, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to share my screen here so I can kind of go through the presentation. So hopefully you're able to see the presentation coming up here.
Yep, we can.
Okay, perfect. Once again, I'm Tom Olinger. I'm the governmental service partner that has been on the job here, so I appreciate you allowing me to present to the board. It'll kind of be a similar situation to what we did in the last year. We'll go through just kind of the overall audit opinion and our responsibility. We'll talk some about the general fund results, and then also the food service and community ed funds. And then we'll kind of go through a few key performance indicators just on kind of comparisons with other schools within the state here. So, you know, as far as our audit opinion, we did issue a unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion. And as part of our responsibilities, we test Minnesota legal compliance, and then this year we also tested single audit, which means if there's federal dollars that are over that are spent at over $750,000, requires a single audit. And based on this year, there were actually 2 programs that we needed to test. So we tested the federal dollars related to the food service, and then also coronavirus aid dollars that we had. And as this slide notes, in both the Minnesota legal compliance and the single audit, we had no instances of non-compliance. With the Minnesota legal compliance, we test things like cash and deposits and investments, disbursements, conflict of interest, expenditures, which we really kind of take a sample of various transactions throughout the year and test for those compliance with state statutes. So we're pleased to note that both for the federal and the state compliance, we were no findings. A couple of findings that we did have, and then also one that we got rid of was for this year we had a material audit adjustment finding, which is very similar to what we had in the past. We just kind of assist adjusting the taxes and grants receivable along with some capital assets. We had to look at some long-term leases this year for that. So we just had adjustments at the end of the year that resulted in a material difference there. But the management has made those adjustments, and the books are up to speed now. As far as the other 2 findings, a limited segregation of duties, I think just the thing to note on that you know, the segregation of duties, you know, we could certainly add staff to get rid of this finding, but you know, part of it is just understanding that you know, the board's responsibility of kind of, you know, asking questions about disbursements, looking at that, and you're kind of a piece of that overall kind of oversight for that. This is a common finding with kind of school districts your size, but I just kind of wanted to reiterate the point of you know, having the board be a part of that too. And then also we do have a finding related to preparation of financial statements. Once again, this is also a common finding. We have this. We prepare the financial statements, but about a week ago we went through management in more detail and kind of talked through the financial statements and got approval of that and kind of walked through that. But that is certainly a finding that we've had that was from last year. The one finding that we did get rid of, as we noted, the student activities purpose summaries. So when we tested the student activity accounts, these were present for this year, for 2022. So the good news is that we got a chance to remove that finding for this year. Getting into some of the financial numbers here. So kind of taking a look at the overall like general fund expenditures compared to the average daily membership. So as you kind of see for this year, that did spike up for this year. We'll kind of, you know, there's twofold here that we saw in this spike. First, we've seen school districts increase expenditures just because of the additional federal dollars that came in for ESSERs and GEARS. So we have seen a trend of those expenditures going upwards. On top of that, we had, as you can kind of see the last couple of years, we've had reductions of student count. So a combination of that really resulted in that spike. We'll kind of show a little bit of a trend of the overall expenditures on a later slide, and maybe just some things to kind of keep in mind as you move forward and kind of keeping track of where these ADM numbers are at going forward in the future. Taking a look at the general fund balance, the yellow line there is kind of your overall general fund budget over the last few years. So as you can kind of see, we did have a spike up in the expenditures in 22 and 23, which is, kind of directly related to what other school districts have seen with the additional federal dollars coming in and those costs there. But over the last 2 years, it's stayed relatively flat on there. We have been seeing just the last couple of years just an increase in fund balance from the about 28%, which is kind of right in line to where you're at, to the 2022 of the 34.7%, which is a little bit above the average. The thing that I would just kind of caution you that here is that that fund balance has built up a little bit, but the thing to keep in mind with the enrollment dropping and then the potential federal dollars being reduced there, that percentage could be used up in future years if those expenditure track kind of keeps on the same way. So you can kind of look at that as just some reserves to kind of keep that level of expenditures moving forward from year to year. And we'll kind of take a look at a comparison with other schools on just where your regular and secondary ed kind of falls in relationship to other cities of dollars per student there too, which we've had talked about in the past. So I think just kind of keeping track of this and knowing that in the future you might have to budget for a loss in this general fund, which would cut into these reserves in the future. Taking a look at the overall general fund budget to actual, the revenues for this last year did exceed the budget by about $212,000. A portion of this is definitely the federal and state aid, the additional dollars that you received there. Expenditures did come under the budgeted expenditures. A couple of major areas that were just kind of offset each other. Special ed did come below budget by about $120,000, but that positive variance was really kind of offset by the regular and secondary education along with vocational instruction budget, which a combination of those exceeded budget by about $120,000. So overall for this year, the net change in fund balance was about $203,000. Taking a look at some of the revenues over the last 2 years here. So obviously state sources is a big area of your funding. As you kind of see, that did go up this year, even though your ADM just dropped some, but that was just the additional funding tied to the state source. And then also the federal source did go up based on those expenditures that were spent. So local sources are really just kind of like miscellaneous revenue, taxes are tied in there, and some other revenues. We'll talk a little bit about taxes on a later slide there as we kind of pull that piece out of that local source. Taking a look at the general fund expenditures, this graph really kind of shows the breakdown of where the expenditures did occur. There was an increase from the previous year, and as I talked about those expenditures being over budget a little bit, the main increases were elementary and secondary instruction. A couple more slides here will show how those two programs compare to other districts within the state here, but that has trended up, but those were covered by additional dollars that you received on the federal and state side. The general fund expenditures per ADM did kind of track up this year. It's really kind of pulling right in line with what that state average is. And what I'm seeing with school districts too, because of that additional funding, that dotted line there, we're basically using past experience to kind of project that out. I see that dotted line for next year probably go up at a little bit steeper slope than what that is, and probably right in line with where your slope is between 22 or going into 22 and 23. So you definitely are trending with what other school districts are seeing there for the overall general fund expenditures. This just kind of tracks your overall general fund budget. I think kind of taking a look at that statewide average, which is the black line, and also Region 9. So you were tracking in line the last couple of years. We did see an uptick in 21 and 22. But like I said, I think, moving forward as having that little bit of flexibility on the budget side with declining enrollment, we will probably see that kind of pull back within that statewide average in future years as you potentially might have to spend down some of those dollars based on where your expenditures are at. Food service, we've seen an increase in revenue and expenditures in the food service. The overall net change was $105,000 for this year, which is at the 109. We've seen that track ahead with the food service with schools across the state is having that fund balance increase as the additional federal dollars came in for this program. What we see is that you're kind of right in line with what other school districts are, and you're still below leading into next year's fund balance. For next year, the guidelines are going to be the 6 month of expenditures that you could have in available cash balance, and so you're well under that for this point, but kind of keeping that in mind that did increase for this last year. And taking a look at the expenditures per ADM, certainly that did increase in the food service, and this is pretty common on what we're seeing there for 22. And like I said, when we project out for next year, we're going to see this green line kind of shoot up at a steeper slope than what it is currently at. So this is pretty common with what we're seeing for this last year based on where the funding was coming from. And community service did have a decrease in fund balance. This was kind of intentional to kind of spend down some of that fund balance for this last year. So currently you're at that $106,000 in fund balance that can be used for future needs. And then taking a look at that community service, we see that increase. I think schools are coming off, kind of COVID and having a full year of being open, and so we're seeing those expenditures go up as the programs start to generate and get back to the pre-pandemic dollars that we have there. So that did increase this last year. Taking a look at the debt service, listing out all your debt service, we for the next 10 years. So you kind of see we do have that 2016A crossover refunding bond that will be dropping off after next year, 2023, which will reduce some of your debt service. But as you can kind of see, they just kind of slowly drop off with really the most recent project, the capital facilities or the school building bond in 2019, really kind of staying on for until 2040, which that will stay kind of flat as you move forward throughout the years through that 2040. Cash and investment balance. So this year, for 2020, we had a lot of the unspent bond proceeds for the building, and the majority of that was spent down in 2021. So that was why that drop is. For 21 to 22, we had just under $4 million. As you can kind of see, we did have a drop in the cash. What I would say for this is the timing of when you receive your state and federal dollars. So even though it dropped about $400,000, the receivable that is yet to come from the state and feds is up $400,000. So really, if you kind of take a look at that and the timing of collections, you'll probably fall right in about where your cash and investment balance is from the previous year. Taking a look at property taxes, as I noted earlier about the local dollars. For you, I think the per ADM is a little bit higher than what the region is. What I would say is we've kept the property taxes relatively flat over the years, and with the decrease in enrollment, it's going to increase this per EDM. What I really like to look at is really the average school district property tax per home, and then the amount per 100,000. This really shows what the impact is on the citizens. And as you can kind of see, for this last year, it's well below that average in the region and statewide average at 338. In the region 9, it's about 612. And the per 100K is about 250 compared to 450 on the region. So this really is showing what the impact on the residents are on your portion of the property taxes in the area. Okay, taking a look at the elementary and secondary instruction, as we talked about earlier, both of these did exceed budget, but really you're actually pulling those dollars closer to where the statewide averages are. So those have been trending up, which we can kind of look at that as a good thing of going back within the school and the instruction part of it. But part of this also is the increase in federal and state dollars as you move forward. So taking a look at future years on where that funding is and where these expenditures at, I think will be important in kind of monitoring. Does now get to the point of keeping those in line where your ADM is at. Last few years, special ed has stayed relatively flat over the last 4 years, and it's kind of continued that. And this really is in line with what the number of students in special ed are. So it really is kind of trending about the same line as where the statewide average is. So yeah, I think those are a few of the items that I wanted to talk about regarding on the financial side. We certainly want to note that overall the audit went relatively smoothly, so we appreciate management getting us the information, and we also kind of appreciate the discussion as we go through the financial report too with management. But overall, I thought it went well, and I think we're on the right track here. So with that, I would certainly open it up to any questions that the board can have.
So understanding it accurately, we grew our fund balance roughly 200,000. Is that, am I reading that right?
Yeah, that is correct.
And are you seeing that a little bit across the board, and because of?
We have been seeing an increase in the fund balance with other school districts just because of the additional state and federal dollars.
Sure.
And also it's kind of taking a look at where they're at with where the dollars are spent too. So it could certainly be a timing on when they are spent. I go back to my original comment too, as the enrollment is trending downward, that a bit of additional fund balance can certainly help with a little flexibility, as if federal and state dollars get pulled back at all too. It allows a little bit more of a flexibility there. So,
Thank you. Any other questions on this before we allow Tom to leave us from this meeting? And as Mr. Mayak said, I think this is coming up on the agenda later in the meeting.
Correct,
for
yep. We'll approve the audit.
Sounds like we're good to go then, so thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
okay, well thank
Thank
you.
you.
And if any questions do come up, feel free to reach out to us. We certainly appreciate working with you.
Very good, thank you, Tom.
Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, After that, we can move into our admin reports. Mr. Bunn or Mr. Kopechki, I guess if you need the presentation up or just gonna speak. To you.
Oh, wow. That's new. All right, so we had homecoming, as you're aware. Did a couple different did some things a little bit differently. Again, this year we had an activity, one per day. Kids really seemed to enjoy that. We did, which was kind of neat, a faculty coronation, volleyball tournament, a game show, and lip sync. And then obviously the normal activities with the parade and some of those other things. Our band and folks were able to go over to Allendale as well, so that was an awesome opportunity. Student council and, you know, Barb Wrestler in particular and the cheer team did an awesome job of just planning everything, and it really went well. As you're aware, we had the sprinkler system go a little wacky one day, and kind of put the kitchen down for a couple days, at least, kind of. The Pro Start kids were able to, because we have the commercial kitchen in the Fax area, the Pro Start kids were able to help the cooks, and so that was a, you know, you can look at a negative situation into some silver lining, and that was a pretty neat experience for those kids. So, yeah, it wasn't great what happened, but it happened, and the kids got to learn something along the way. So that was really neat. You know, the PTO always helps us out for providing meals for staff for conferences, and again, the Pro Start and FCS kids were able to be part of that. And you know, I think it's always easy for folks to look at different negative things or whatever, not just in schools, but everywhere in the world. Well, I thought it was pretty neat. The varsity volleyball players went to a junior high game and made signs and cheered on the younger kids, and it wasn't more than, I would say, I don't even think the game was over yet. Do you, Mike, where we got an email from Albert Lee?
It was close, yeah, it was pretty quickly that we got the email.
Just saying how neat and cool that was, that the older kids were there to support the younger ones in their endeavors. So yeah, it was really pretty neat. Couple neat things during the, this is kind of, I'm jumping back to homecoming when we did the lip sync contest. The winning performance, actually, it put goosebumps in the back of my neck, just how the kids responded to our young lady that won. So a lot of good out there. It's really pretty neat. And we had some younger kids that also did the lip sync, some 6th graders, and that was a pretty brave thing to do in front of the entire, you know, 7 through 12 student body. So very fun. That's all I got.
Yeah, at the elementary level, we our biggest thing was homecoming as well, and that whole week we kind of kicked it off with our 2nd graders going to the village of yesteryear in Owatonna guess they've been doing that for years and years, so they were able to continue that. And then it just basically got us to that homecoming week, the dress-up days, and all that fun stuff that really amps up the elementary kids more than I could have ever imagined, but that was fun to navigate. Yeah, homecoming itself, threw a few pictures on there about the Pep Fest. I just want to throw out how impressed I was with the high school students, from the cheerleaders to the court, the cross-country team, and the band that come over pretty much 2 times that whole day, making the trek back and forth and taking their time out of their high school activities and being part of that whole high school experience to come and just kind of work with our elementary kids. That was kind of fun to see. So I know it's a long day for those kids, and I just appreciated their time. So it was a successful day. And then being Fire Prevention and Awareness Week this week, our whole student population by class got to go to the fire hall in Ellendale and check out the equipment and learn a little bit about fire safety and all that stuff. So that was kind of where we were in a month.
All right, thank you. And Macy is at an activity tonight, so she through the community had information out there as well. The last thing I have on my report too is just a quick review here on the policy review. You know, your agenda that you have in front of you is long, and a lot of it is the different policies. Just so everyone's clear that really there's kind of 3 different categories. There's the mandatory policies that we go through, and Sue's going to correct me if I go astray here, but our mandatory policies that we review every year, they're introduced and you act upon them in the consent agenda. The second category is the non-substantive, where again it's just corrections to some simple language. The red line version, Sue has shared that, and that's in your folder too. Just some very simple policy changes that just need your approval of the consent agenda. The new one that we've seen this year that we didn't see last year was the, I would call them the substantive or the statutory and recommended changes. So that the process on that, again, later on we're going to go through the action items, and the first reading is this presentation and information that you're presented with. And what you're asked to do then moving forward in the next few weeks is to go through those policies, because there's bigger changes and changes that might catch your attention that absolutely will need your action later to approve. One of the things that you're going to see probably a couple times is the work of committee members or the work of committees for different groups. The continuing ed committee, as you know, is that's on the agenda here, that the board can appoint a community member to that committee. So that's a big deal. That's a big change, and these policies will have things like that or similar types of changes that just need our special attention. So as we're going through it, or as you look those over in the next couple of weeks, we can, for the second reading, have that happen in November, where we have a discussion, or we can get our board policy committee together to crank out some of the discussion and potential changes, and then bring that back to the board either in November or December. Okay? Does that clear up the mud? Or add to it?
Got it.
Okay. With that, that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Are there any board member comments this evening? The next regular meeting will be Monday, November 21st, 2022. We will be in Ellendale at 6:30. that, we'll move into the consent agenda items, and Mr. Mayak, would you please introduce those?
Yeah, again, as always, the consent agenda, the board's been furnished with the background materials on each item, or we've had discussions at our previous meeting. We'll act on these as one without discussion. If anyone wants something removed from the consent agenda, now would be the time to do it, and we'll vote on that separately. Before we get into that, I will make public notice of the donations that have come in. We have a $300 donation from Geneva Fire for our Eagle Bluff trip, a $500 donation from Finley's Wings at Work, again for our Eagle Bluff trip, a $30 donation from Zola Wayne of Geneva with the REACH program, and then we have a $55 anonymous donation and a $110 donation from Sheila Lutz with for the snack cart. With that, and then with the note that on the September board meeting minutes, it reads that Rick introduced the agenda, and that should be Dan introduced the agenda at that. Travis, I'm sorry. Give credit to where credit is due, that's.
I didn't do that yet.
Okay.
It's
That
memorable,
Travis.
it sounds like.
So I guess for public record, it was Travis introduced the agenda at our September meeting. And with that note, I would ask that you approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with corrections. I'll second.
Motion made by Mr. Rowell, seconded by Mr. Schoenrock to approve the consent agenda items as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So we move forward with our bonds here this evening. We have a resolution relating to the $5,400,000 general obligation facility maintenance and tax abatement bonds. Mr. Mayak.
Yes, and this is where I'll turn it over to Steve Pumper with PMA, as he'll present the information and the results of the bond sale that took place this morning.
Great, I love the technology works, that's always good. Well, Mr. Chair, board members, Mike Carlesou, welcome, Steve Pumper with PMA Financial. As the board knows, you've been working with SiteLogic for quite some time to look at some deferred maintenance items, some indoor air quality issues, and some parking lot issues. You brought PMA in this spring to help come up with some creative ways to finance some of those projects. And we're kind of at the end part of the financing with the bids that we received this morning. So this morning at 10 o'clock, we had a competitive sale. I'm not sure where that's showing up, but and we received 8 different bids. The lowest bid was from FHN Financial Capital Markets at a true interest cost of 3.4914%. If you look at when we met with the board earlier and showed you our preliminary plan assumptions that the board approved through an authorizing resolution, we thought that we'd be selling $5.15 million worth of bonds with a true interest cost of just over 4%. Then you see our debt service levy numbers and the total debt service. And what happened because of the great results that we had this morning with 8 different bidders bidding on your project, we're able to achieve your results of having enough money to fund your projects with selling only $4,985,000 of bonds with a true interest cost of 3.49%. So your debt service levy is only at $578,501, which is just over $18,000 less than what we thought originally. So when, just as a side note, when you approved your preliminary levy in September, it would have included the debt service number on the left, $596,000. So when you certify your final levy in December, it will go down to that $578,000 number. And we'll take care of submitting that information to the Department of Education so that shows properly on your levy. But that's all good news. Your total debt service, instead of being $6,900,000, is that $6,661,000, so about $262,000 better than we were anticipating when we had the board take action on the authorizing resolution. So all really good news for you, for sure. Again, just kind of showing you what the steps that were taken. So back on August 15th, you passed a long-term facility maintenance resolution. We sent that to the commissioner, and that was approved. You published the notice of bonds for facility maintenance projects totaling approximately $3,975,000. And then you took action on an authorizing resolution in August, at the end of August, again, allowing PMA to go to the market to sell bonds not to exceed a par amount of $5.4 million, and it came in at 4.985. The true interest cost could not exceed 4.5%, and even with the rising interest rates, you just had great results today at 3.49%. Obviously, we acted as your municipal advisor on this, and you are participating in the Minnesota State Credit Enhancement Program. You probably were informed about this prior, but just again want to remind you that's a no-cost program, but what it means is that if for whatever reason the district does not make a payment on your bonds, the state will back it up and make that payment, which also helps reduce or contributes to the low interest rate you receive today. This is what the debt service levy will look like going forward. It's interesting just following your audit presentation and looking what those bar charts look like. It's going to look different now in your next year's audit. So the blue bars represent your existing debt service. The red bars represent the additional debt service with the issue of these new bonds. You'll see that the first 10 years are higher, and that's because the abatement bonds, which were the bonds that fund your parking lot improvements, have a debt service schedule of 10 years, where your long-term facility maintenance bonds, which funds your indoor air quality, has a debt service schedule of 15 years. So that's the way you see that drop off. And one of the main reasons for that is you try to sell bonds that match the useful life of any project, and parking lots are kind of, in that 10-year range of when you sell bonds. Oops, went too far. So what does that mean for the tax impact? So on a $200,000 home in your district, the abatement bonds will add $27 annually. The long-term facility maintenance, the indoor air quality portion of it will add $36. The last part, which we call the LTFM regular, doesn't add any tax impact to a home because you're just taking money that you're currently receiving in your operating funds and turning that over to a debt service payment. So the total impact annually for a $200,000 home by the issuance of these bonds would be $63. If you look at agricultural homestead, that's valued at $10,000 an acre, you'll see that the abatement bonds adds 22 cents. The indoor air quality portion of the bonds adds 47 cents. And this is again where it's kind of an interesting piece. Your regular LTFM, where we're just shifting money from the operating fund to the debt service fund, actually shows a decrease for agricultural land because the Act to School credit applies on bonded debt. It doesn't apply in operating funds. So by shifting over from operating funds to debt service funds, you actually see a decrease of 35 cents an acre. And then the increase of Act to School credit going to 70% for taxes payable in 23 will decrease it an additional 28 cents. So the overall impact of these bonds on a $10,000 an acre is 6 cents. And it doubles that roughly for non-homesteaded agricultural land. One piece I just want to highlight is, as part of this process, we went through we had your bonds rated, we had your district rated by S&P. Carla and Mike participated on that call. Very, very important part because your rating has a very large impact on what interest rate you'll receive. Carla and Mike did a great job on that call, I have to say. Another piece, though, I want board to pat yourself on the back. They certainly look at the governance and they look at what's your fund balance, what's been the history behind it, and because of the action your board has taken over the years, you received a strong rating again. They affirmed your A+ underlying rating on these bonds in addition to the credit enhancement rating as well. So all the work that kind of goes on behind the scenes, this really has a definitive outcome. So great work on Carla and Mike and to board members as well. The timeline, I won't go through all these pieces, but you'll see it started back on August 15th as far as the official actions taken on financing everything. And we're now on October 17th where we received the rates. The next part of your board agenda will be to take action to certify these bonds. Once you do that, the bonds are sold and priced and locked in, and we can't go backwards on that part. And then the last piece is the bond closing, which is November 10th, and that's the date that you actually will receive the money in your bank account so that you can fund all the projects going forward. And with that, we bring it to the action item on your agenda tonight, and that's to approve a resolution that's ratifying the sale of these facility maintenance bonds for $4,985,000. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it to you for any questions.
Well, that's exciting that the interest rate came in so aggressively. We appreciate your work on finding us that. I think the general public is aware of, like you had stated, the direction interest rates have gone, but I think that's a very large victory in the eyes of taxpayers throughout this district to secure this at that rate, so.
Yeah, thank you. And again, it's an indication, especially having 8 bidders, it's a lot of bidders for a project this size, and it's an indication of how valued they found your district and your finances, the shape they're in, to be able to purchase something that they find secure.
Appreciate that. Any other questions or comments?
I was gonna say, all 8, excuse me, all 8 bidders were, really close.
Sure.
I think that's kinda nice.
I feel pretty good about the 6 cent thing. Not too worried
Excellent.
about getting any blowback from that, I guess.
Right.
And just to add, they did this very successful, and Steve has already reached out to SiteLogic to say the funds will be available November 11th. So now what I need from you is a draw schedule, so he has a plan put together by the 11th on how to invest that money to maximize our return until we're able to do the projects. So, I mean.
Find something that will pay us 4%.
Oh, honestly, I mean, you may laugh at that, but we'll wait till we see the draw schedule. But if I were to do an investment for you right now, that's for a year long, I'll get north of 4% for you. I mean, your net will be north of 4. I can't promise that will happen in a month, but my guess it still will stay there. So I think you're in a good market for generating some interest for sure.
Good. Thanks to everyone involved in doing their part. With that, we'll ask for a motion ratifying the sale of the general obligation facility maintenance bond series 2022A in the original amount of $4,985,000, fixing their form and specifications, directing their execution and delivery, and providing further payment. Care to make that motion?
So moved.
A second?
I'll second it.
Motion made by Mr. Schmidt, seconded by Mr. Mueller to approve the resolution ratifying the sale of the general obligation maintenance bonds. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. And
Thank
just, Rick and Terry, after the meeting's over, I just need some signatures. Okay?
Perfect.
Very good, thank you, Steve. Thank you, board, that's exciting.
That's amazing, yep. Good work, people. Moving on to the audit report that Mr. Mayak referred to earlier, and we heard the presentation by Tom. Any questions or further comments about that? If not, we would entertain a motion to approve that audit report.
I make a motion to approve the 2021-22 audit report.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Engel, seconded by Mr. Schmidt to approve the 21-22 audit report as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We should have welcomed a new guest here this evening. We didn't earlier on, but we'll take this opportunity to talk about this subject. Ms. Stenzel, or Sterneagle, I mean. Apologize.
You're good?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
What? I'm just here to just try to butter you guys up a little bit, that's all.
Mr. Mayak, is this your show?
Yeah, and really, we, last month when Liz presented to us, it was very warmly received. I thought this was a great idea, and we said, let's jump into it. That obviously there's a commitment on Liz's end and a commitment from the board as well. I think after that meeting, Carrie Pensinger, our school district nurse, did throw some information out there for things that you would consider. And I guess the request to implement, again, is just looking for the recommendation to approve Liz on proceeding forward with the training. When the dog is fully trained and prepared and the communication that's needed and necessary takes place, that the therapy dog would be incorporated into our school district. So we're looking at possibly some late spring of this school year, spring of '23, with some introductions, depending on training and whatnot, and then the full implementation would begin with the '23-24 school year. Again, assuming all goes well and the board approves.
I assume you discussed this last month about a potential, exit plan if it doesn't work out, is that?
Yeah, I think that's probably more of the training as well, that
Sure.
if there is things that take place or
Right.
larger concerns, that nothing is permanent, that it's
Sure,
really
very
up
flexible.
to, yep, and, that could be on the student perception or the student reception,
Right.
that could be on the nature, the acceptance of Buxley, and so there's,
Looks like pretty easy to get along with, actually.
I think you almost screwed Mrs. Bentley's arm off.
I didn't notice a growl when I walked by, so that's a good test.
lick the arm off.
Heard his name though, so now
Great.
it's like, what?
Great.
Someone say snack?
Let's go for a walk.
Yes, so, but to speak to the exit plan real quick, yes, so kind of in summarizing my presentation last month, it really just came down to if this is an absolute fail of an experiment, implementation, whatever, it's pretty black and white, we just dissolve his
Right.
role here, and
Sure.
that is what it is, and we gave it a try,
Excellent.
so.
Well, I appreciate you researching that, and it's exciting to see that come. So at this time, we'll introduce a motion for that. Would anyone care to?
I'll make a motion to approve the moving forward with the therapy dog as presented.
I second.
Motion made by Mr. Rouse, seconded by Ms. Engel to move forward with the therapy dog as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I think we've had some information on a community member for the Continuing Education Committee a couple times in Mr. Mayak's newsletter. Mr. Mayak, do you have anything to add about that subject?
Just real quickly, that again, that's kind of that policy changes that we're seeing, and the continued ed, Ms. Bentley's part of that as well, that some of the things discovered in writing the bylaws and going through that and making sure that we're compliant and doing the things that we need to do and are supposed to do. So that's the recommendation, my recommendation of the board, to appoint Sarah Lockholtz as a community member for the NRHEG Continuing Education Committee.
So move. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Mueller, seconded by Mr. Schmidt to appoint Sarah Wackles as the community member for the Continuing Education Committee. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Seems like a long ways away, but January will come here before we know it. We need to set the organizational meeting date for that. Mr. Meyer, do you have something in mind?
Yeah, typically we'll just grab that first Monday, get it done with and organized, and so that is Monday, January 2nd of 2023 at 5:30, and we'll hold that meeting here in the media center, if that works for you and everyone's plans.
So you want it the second, because in the minutes here it says the third.
I apologize, I'm looking at my notes in a second.
Yeah, it says Monday, January 3rd, but it's Monday, January 2nd, correct?
Second is the correct date
Yes.
of
Yeah.
Monday? Yes, for the second.
Yeah.
Is there a motion to approve that as the
So moved.
second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion made by Mr. Schmidt, seconded by Mr. Schoenrock to approve Monday, January 2nd as the organizational meeting date. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We also have conflicts again with January and February on regular board meeting dates.
Yeah, just with the holidays that take place, it's Martin Luther King Day and President's Day, so we're looking for your approval to move the meeting dates to Tuesday, January 17th, and the February meeting to take place on Tuesday, February 21st.
Again, it says on my sheet the 18th, so I'll change it to the 17th. All right.
Yep, 17th.
I'll move our January, February meetings to Tuesday, January 17th, and February to Tuesday, February 21st.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Schoenrock, seconded by Mr. Schmidt to move the regularly scheduled meeting dates for January to January 17th, and for February, the regular meeting will be on the 21st, both Tuesdays. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Mr. Mayak gave us some information about the purchase of a mobility van. Mr. Mayak, please.
Yeah, we never like stop talking about transportation and HVAC and fire panels. I think the more that those topics come up, the better. And this is exactly what it is, that the transportation demands are always changing. Unless things have changed since our cabinet meeting, but 4 new requests have come in the last basically 2 weeks on transportation needs that are required of us for some of our special ed students. And the whole drama and dilemma of approving vans last year and switching it over and increasing the money for mobility vans and just the supply and demand. And it all boils down to we got rid of 2 vans, we had to replace those 2 vans, we need a mobility van, and so I'm asking for your approval on purchasing a mobility van and actually taking the rental that we have now from Cummins Mobility and purchasing it outright rather than renting it.
Sounds like the logical thing to do. We have to fulfill our needs of what we have in the district.
That's the long and short of it, yeah.
Yep.
But
I'll make a motion to purchase the mobility van as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Rouse, seconded by Ms. Engel to move forward with the purchase of a mobility van as presented. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. In our last agenda item here is the reading of the board policies. Mr. Mayak, please.
as I introduced it earlier, that this list of statutory and recommended or substantiated policies need our special attention, and this would constitute as of the first reading, with the expectation and understanding that as a board and as a superintendent, we'll dig into them a little bit further and then meet and discuss any changes that the policies are recommending. So I ask for your recommendation as to approve this first reading of the policies that are listed. The policies 208, 209, 210, 410, 415, 416, 417, 418, 515, 524, 603, 604, and 708, 709, 721, and 722. Approve those as our first reading and continue on with the policy procedures.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Mueller, seconded by Mr. Schmidt to approve the first reading of the policies as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Brings us to adjournment. I would entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Engel, seconded by Mr. Schmidt to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.